Raider Nation. Thank you for joining us on the Only Nation podcast, brought to you by the Raider Ramble and sponsored by Chucky's Thugs. My name is Heidi, but you may know me as Kevlar Prom Dress or even Raider Ladybug. I'm here with T3 Raider Facts, and we're ready to talk some Raiders football together.
All right, Heidi, things are heating up and changes are happening, and we're going to break down some of that today, so let's go to it.
Today on the show, we'll talk about the new additions to the coaching staff for the Raiders, and then we'll take a look at the 5 current Raiders listed among the top 200 free agents according to Pro Football Focus. And then we'll look at one of the position groups going into free agency, the offensive line.
Okay, Raider Nation, we gave away a customized jersey on our last show, but we have some exciting things coming up in 2022. Here's how you can get in touch with us throughout the offseason. Give us a call on the Only Nation podcast voicemail line at 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. You can also check us out on the web at onlynationpod.com.
Here's the latest Raider news.
Here is how head coach Josh McDaniels' coaching staff is shaping up so far. The offensive coordinator is Mick Lombardi, who was the Patriots wide receiver coach last season. Carmen Brasillo comes over from New England to coach the offensive line. Edgar Bennett is the lone returning coach from last year's staff, and he will continue to work with the wide receivers. Bo Hardigree, last year's offensive assistant in New England, is the new quarterbacks coach. On defense, Patrick Graham comes over from the New York Giants. Working with him will be former Giants linebacker and Arizona State assistant coach Antonio Pierce. Chris Ash comes over from Jacksonville as the new defensive backs coach, and he will be assisted by Jason Simmons, who was the defensive secondary coach last year with the Carolina Panthers. Rob Ryan was added as a senior defensive assistant. Tom McMahon comes over from Denver as the new special teams coordinator. And just recently added was defensive line coach Frank Oakham, former defensive tackle with Tampa Bay and the Houston Texans, who comes to the Raider staff by way of Baylor University.
A lot of changes in that coaching unit. And, of course, we knew that would happen with Josh McDaniels coming in, and we knew he would bring in some people and some connections from New England. And, of course, once Patrick Graham came on, we knew that there might be some connections with the Giants. I'm really happy to see the addition of Antonio Pierce helping out with the linebackers. It always helps when you have somebody who is an accomplished player at that position to come in and assist the players. And the linebacking core really needs it. They really do. So I think that will be a good push for them. I'm not really certain about Tom McMahon, the new special teams coordinator. I think it's a step down from Rich Bisaccia. Of course, we also think so highly of Rich anyway. I really had a question about Rob Ryan as a senior defensive assistant. I know he's been experienced, but that move kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit. I'm hoping that they just bring him on from some veteran leadership, and hopefully he can add some things there. But that's the one move that I really kind of raised my eyebrows on.
Yeah, it was a mouthful trying to get through that list of everyone.
It was.
Yeah, and I can't speak to a lot of the coaches. I know that they're pretty good. Anyone that comes from the Patriots is good. And anyone that had connections with Patrick Graham, he's good. So I'm looking forward to see what they can all bring together this next season for the Raiders.
I think the main thing that we all need to be hopeful for is the fact that this is a brand new staff and it's bringing in different pieces from all over the place. And this is Josh McDaniels' staff. So we'll see how he brings them all together and which of the coaches kind of elevates himself in terms of his player position group and what kind of impact they have on not only the players who are there now, but also the new players who will be coming in.
Yeah, let's see if he can erase the memory of his foray into Broncos about 10 years ago. So
that will be nice.
Yes. The Raiders have signed free agent defensive back Cravon LeBlanc. LeBlanc was signed by the New England Patriots as an undrafted free agent following the 2016 draft. Going into his 7th season, he has played 52 games, starting in 16. He was last with the Houston Texans on their practice squad in 2021.
And once again, we've seen plenty of signings like this. I'm not extremely hopeful that LeBlanc makes the team. I am glad to see that we're bringing in somebody with a connection to the Patriots who does have some experience and can hopefully transition that over. It'll be a matter of seeing what Patrick Graham views in him, what he sees in him, and how he sees him fitting in with his unit. Once again, I wish him well, but not expecting a whole lot.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of moves like that this offseason. The Raiders have also added offensive lineman Jordan Meredith. The 6'3", 300-pound guard signed with the Los Angeles Rams last May after the 2021 draft and spent training camp with the team before being released with the final roster cuts.
And again, we're adding depth to that offensive line position. We really needed the depth over the course of the 2021 season. This is just the first of many pieces that'll be coming in and out. So, again, wishing Jordan Meredith well. He's got the size. He's got the potential. Let's see if he's got the goods.
Sounds good. After it was announced that Cliff Branch was finally voted into the Hall of Fame, his former teammates and fellow wide receiver Fred Biletnikoff wrote a wonderful tribute letter, which can be found on Raiders.com. In the letter, Fred says, "The one thing I'll always see when I think of you is that incredible smile. To this day, it stays with me. I can still see you running down the field, ball in hand, fast as can be, with a smile as you took it to the end zone. Cliff Branch will continually be missed, but he is now immortalized in Canton."
Thank God the voters finally saw to it to put Cliff Branch in the Hall of Fame. And I'm just so sickened and irate that he did not get a chance to enjoy this moment, and his family and all of Raider Nation. We're going to have to celebrate this posthumously and look at all the great things he did while he was with the Raiders. But Heidi and I were talking before the show started, and I wish that I had made notes. The one time I was able to sit down with Cliff Branch, and this happened way back in 2010, we were able to just sit down, two people talking in a corner. He found out that I was a teacher, and he was talking about so many things that he learned over the course of his career, not just as a football player, but as a person. And let me try on his Hall of Fame rings. Could not have been nicer. This is somebody that I just met walking up to. I cannot say enough good things about Cliff Branch. He is going to be terribly missed. At least we have his immortality maintained and up there with those in the Raider Nation, with the Raiders, who are already in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think it was about 32 years from the first time he was eligible for the Hall of Fame that he was finally voted in. And that was an ongoing snub for decades that ranked right up there with the ultimate snubs against the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It was really a shame that he wasn't able to see this.
We'll be talking more about Hall of Fame snubs a little later in the show.
Okay. In the discussion round, for our first topic, we're going to take a look at the 5 Raiders listed on the PFF Top 200 free agency list and discuss whether any of them should be brought back or not. At 182 is wide receiver Deshaun Jackson, who is projected for a 1-year, $3 million deal. Next, at number 166, is linebacker KJ Wright, who is projected at 1 year for $2.5 million. Next up is wide receiver Zay Jones, listed at 122. He has a contract projection of 3 years at around $18 million. The next player who comes in at number 60 on the list is quarterback Marcus Mariota, who is projected for 1 year at $8 million, fully guaranteed. And last and highest on the list is cornerback Casey Hayward, who comes in at number 25 and is projected for 1 year at $6.5 million, fully guaranteed. So the 5, who stays and who goes?
All right, here's my breakdown. First of all, Deshaun Jackson. He's had his time, and I wish him well. There are just too many young, talented receivers out there with a lot more left in the tank. So for Deshaun Jackson, I say gone. KJ Wright, the only reason I think he was brought in was his familiarity with the Gus Bradley system, but he didn't really do all that much. Also gone. Now, Casey Hayward, I'm going to skip down to him next. I think that $6.5 million fully guaranteed is a lot of money to pay for a guy who's getting up there in years and who I don't think is going to have nearly as good a season as he did last year. Plus, I think some other team out there is going to throw a whole bunch of money at him. And if that happens, good for him. He deserves that. But I think his time with the Raiders is done. Now, Marcus Mariota has made a lot of money with the Raiders for doing what little he's been called upon to do. And one reason for that is that he's never been available. I would have loved to have seen more of him in 2021, but it just wasn't in the works. As cute as it would be to keep him on and run some more of those red zone RPOs that we talked about here on the podcast, I just don't see it. I love Marcus and I wish him well, but I see he's gone as well. Now that brings me to Zay Jones. I am the most conflicted about this one because I think he's proven his worth and has become a very dependable target for Derek Carr in this offense. But now we have a new offense and a new coaching staff. The question is, what do they see and what will they see? I say bring back Zay Jones and see what numbers you can crunch with the contract. That would give you Zay Jones, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, any potential number one receiver you might bring in, and then maybe Bryan Edwards and a couple of young receivers through the draft. So of the top 200 PFF free agents who are currently Raiders, Zay Jones is the only one I see bringing back.
Yeah, and I think I have to pretty much agree with you. Deshaun Jackson, he had, one good game as a Raider? Other than that, he was pretty much a non-factor. And nobody that comes from a Patriot mentality is going to be paying $3 million for 3 impact games in a season. So he's as good as gone. And KJ Wright, he also was somewhat of a non-factor. He did contribute a little bit, but I don't see him coming back for $2.5 million, especially because we're not running that defense for him anymore, like you said. Gus Bradley isn't here anymore, and so I completely agree. I don't see him coming back. Marcus Mariota, he is a great backup quarterback. He really is. And I would say 1 year at $8 million isn't a bad price to have a really, really good backup quarterback. But the thing is, you never know if you're going to have him as a backup quarterback. Now, I remember Nick Foles, he did a little something, he won a Super Bowl. He was the backup quarterback for the Eagles. So having someone behind Derek Carr that can step in like that is good, but not if he's out for, 6 games on the season. It's just not going to be worth it. And Casey Hayward, I just don't see them paying $6.5 million for him, fully guaranteed. I agree that, if he's going to get paid elsewhere, he's certainly earned it. He did a great job. He was a lockdown corner. I believe that he was named, the free agent pickup of the year by a few publications. But I don't see him staying with the Patriot GM and head coach. I have to get rid of my thinking, Patriots, we're talking about the Raiders now, but I'm just going by the history of people in that organization. They're not going to pay $6.5 million to a cornerback, especially someone that could be injured. They're just not going to do it. Zay Jones, that one is a toss-up. I totally agree with you on your assessment on all of these. I think he could be worth a 3-year contract at $18 million, but it's going to depend on what the Raiders do in free agency and what they do in the draft. So it's a toss-up. I'm interested to see what they do. I think he could be worth sticking around, but I just don't know if they'll keep him.
It would be easier for me to make the assessment if I really felt like Bryan Edwards was going to come back and be strong and be dependable. I'd be willing to go ahead and ride out the remainder of his rookie contract. And so let's just go with Edwards and let Zay Jones find the best deal he can with another team. But I'm just not that confident. Bryan Edwards has not really stepped up the way that I thought. And he still had some injury history, and I'm still worried that may come back to bite the Raiders. So I'd like to keep Zay Jones around, if for nothing else, then he's proven his dependability and his worth.
Yeah. I really thought that Bryan Edwards was going to go off this past year. I really thought he was going to come into his own, and he just didn't do it. Hopefully he does. He has so much potential, but I'm not sure if he's going to be able to put it together or not.
Yeah, I think you're right. So here's discussion topic number 2. We know that the Raiders need help on the offensive line. So let's dive back into the PFF list of top 200 free agents and concentrate just on the O-line. Here are the top 5 names on the list. First, we have tackle Terron Armstead of the New Orleans Saints. He's listed as the number 2 free agent on the list. He's a top-end left tackle. He may be 30 years old, but he's one of the best tackles in the league. Now, his projected contract is 3 years at $20 million a year with $43 million of it guaranteed. Now, bear in mind, he's been left tackle. The next one that we have, number 9 on the list, is a tackle also, Orlando Brown of the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, Brown is one of the most consistent tackles in the game, has great length as a pass blocker, and has worked both sides of the line in multiple schemes. He would be expensive, projected at 5 years for $105 million, with $73 million guaranteed. So if you're thinking about Orlando Brown, there's a huge investment for you. Going down a little further, we have guard Brandon Scherf of the Washington football team. I'm still going to call him that. I can't wrap my head around Commanders. So
it's Commandos. Commandos.
Commandos. Yeah, let's see that locker room. That's it. So we have guard Brandon Scherf of the Washington football team. He's one of the best guards in the league when he's healthy. Now, last year he played on his second consecutive franchise tag, but then injured his MCL and had to sit out weeks 5 through 8. But he has strong grades in both run and pass blocking. Scherf's contract projection is 3 years, $50 million, and he ranked 18th on the top 200 list. So, again, a bit of an investment. Next on the list, at number 26, is guard Laken Tomlinson of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, Tomlinson has one of the highest percentages of positively graded run blocks, but he is versatile and has developed into one of the best guards in the league. His projected numbers are 3 years at $9 million per year. And then the fifth name on the list, and I'm going just the top 5 prospects across the entire offensive line. The fifth name on the list is tackle Dwayne Brown of the Seattle Seahawks, coming in at number 32. A true left tackle, once again, he's a 14-year vet. He's been very dependable in pass protection over the years. Now, because of his age, we're probably looking at probably a 1-year deal somewhere in the neighborhood of about $10 million. So, again, there are other names down the list, a couple of whom I'm going to speak on a little bit later. But there they are. Those are the top 5 offensive line free agents available all the way across the line, according to PFF.
Yeah, the Raiders definitely need help on the offensive line. It's going to take a revamping to make it really a worthwhile unit. Tackle Terron Armstead of the New Orleans Saints. Yeah, he's listed as the number 2 free agent. We already have a good left tackle. We need a right tackle. I'm getting tired of the Raiders drafting and signing players and then trying to play them out of position. I don't see a point of signing someone for 3 years at $20 million a year with $43 million of it guaranteed for a position that he doesn't even play. He would have to switch over to right tackle. There's no point in that. Orlando Brown of the Kansas City Chiefs. I could really warm up to the idea of him coming to the Raiders. It would be very expensive, but the Raiders tried paying a right tackle a good chunk of money, and when he played, it paid off. I, of course, am talking about Trent Brown, and the Raiders paid him a really good chunk of money. And the problem is it was the wrong person to give it to. But as far as his ability goes, he was very good. So I could definitely see Orlando Brown coming to the Raiders. I wouldn't mind seeing him as right tackle. We definitely need the right tackle.
You know, if Al Davis were still around, that would be a classic move for him, to take Kansas City's best available free agent and sign him away from the arch rival. That would have been a classic Al Davis move.
Yeah, he'd be smiling and flipping them off and tell Orlando to get in his limo. They're going to Hooters.
Yeah, we're going to get you out of those McDonald's socks.
Yeah. Guard Brandon Scherf of the Washington Commandos.
Commandos. I love that.
Hey, they go Commando. That's the only way I'm going to be able to remember their new name.
I'm not going to be able to get that out of my head now.
I'm not sure how badly we need a starting guard, because I can really see Alex Leatherwood improving in the right guard position. Hopefully, we would keep Denzel Good, and Denzel Good could do a great job in the left guard position. So I'm not sure if we need to spend that on a starting guard, but it's always a possibility, but I'm not sure we need to. and guard Laken Tomlinson. I'm just not sure if we need to sign him. It would be good, definitely, but the Raiders are going to be holding their purse strings a lot closer to them this year. So I'm not sure if they're going to want to spend money on the offensive line so much, which is a shame because it's such an important unit.
Yeah. I'm a little more skeptical because I saw the problems that we had last year trying to hitch our wagons to Richie Incognito, and then he wasn't a go for the whole year. Then we had injuries. So I really think we need to bring in two, not one. So first of all, I have an eye on Morgan Moses. He's a tackle who spent last season with the Jets after shockingly being released by the Washington football team. Now, Moses is an instant starting right tackle and a durable player as well. He would be a bit of an investment in around 3 years, $22.5 million, but this is a position of need, and he is definitely a player of interest. Now, if the Raiders could bring in both Moses and secure a guard, like Mark Lewinsky of the Indianapolis Colts, who comes in on the PFF list at number 128, is an above-average run blocker, a good athlete with power, and he has a little bit of a nasty streak in him as well. That could mean two good pickups for the O-line. Now, he would carry a number of about $6 million per year for 2 or 3 years, but that could still leave some more money open for other things. But for the O-line, once again, I think the Raiders need to pull the trigger twice, not just once.
Oh, yeah, we definitely need to sign a couple of O-linemen. I'm just questioning if the Raiders would spend top dollar for guard. I can understand maybe a top dollar for a right tackle or close to top dollar for that. I'm just not sure about the guard position. Getting good, solid guards, especially ones that add depth, would be very important. But a super expensive contract, I'm not sure I see them doing that.
If one of those upper guys that we had mentioned was a true right tackle, I'd be more apt to spending that money. But Morgan Moses, I think, would be a good solution to come in and instantly plug in that hole. It wouldn't cost as much money. But again, like you, I've seen too many times where the Raiders would bring somebody in and make them change position and play something that they're not accustomed to, and then either fall off the map completely or just sucking.
Yeah. It's a Raider trait. Characteristic of the team.
Not a good one.
I know, it's a frustrating one. All right, T3, instead of a top 3 this week, I understand that you were ready to tee off on something. Do you need to borrow Homer's hammer?
No, Heidi, I don't need Homer's hammer, but I would like to take away some voting rights for more than a few writers who vote for induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So sit back and let me rant. I heard one writer talking this past week about Steeler fatigue and Raider fatigue and Packer fatigue and how players weren't voted in because there were too many players from those teams already. Look, if a guy has Hall of Fame credentials and a Hall of Fame career, the logo on the helmet should never be a point for debate. It took both Kenny Stabler and now Cliff Branch years to make it. And unfortunately, the writers cheated them both out of being able to enjoy it and share it with their families. Hell, legendary Packer Jerry Kramer almost had the same fate. I'm going to lobby right now for 4 guys, even ahead of Jim Plunkett and Lester Hayes, who I think are the next 2 Raiders on the block. The first one is Chuck Howley. Now, if you're not familiar with Chuck Howley, he was a linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys from 1961 through 1972. He produced 25 interceptions and 18 fumble recoveries. Sacks were not even an official stat when he played, but it is said that he had 26 and a half over his career. He had 6 Pro Bowl selections and received 5 first-team All-Pro honors. In addition to that, he's the only player in NFL history to have ever been awarded a Super Bowl MVP as a member of a losing team. And he probably could have been awarded the MVP the following year when the Cowboys won it all. And he wasn't even on the Seniors Committee finalist ballot last year. Unbelievable. Next on the list, Tommy Nobis, linebacker for the Atlanta Falcons from 1966 through 1976. He was NFL Rookie of the Year in 1966 when he was drafted number 1 overall and was in a bidding war between the AFL and NFL. He was a first-team All-Pro in 1967, a second-team All-Pro in 1968, and he was a 5-time Pro Bowler and named to the 1960s All-Decade Team. He may have played for some bad teams, but he was one of the best linebackers in NFL history. He should have been in years ago. The third guy I'm going to mention is a guy that Raider fans, particularly back in the 70s, are familiar with, And it's L.C. Greenwood, who was a defensive end on the steel curtain of those Steelers teams. He roamed that side from 1969 to 1981. He was a four-time Super Bowl champion, a two-time first-team All-Pro in 1974 and 1975, and named to the 1970s All-Decade team. If it weren't for so many other Steelers making it into the Hall of Fame, he'd already be there. And the last one I want to mention is Jim Marshall. He's the defensive end of the Minnesota Vikings. He played from 1961 through 1979, and during that span was an NFL champion, a three-time second-team All-Pro, a two-time Pro Bowler. He registered the most consecutive regular season game starts by a defensive player in NFL history, as well as the most games played by a defensive player. He's also tied for the most complete seasons played by a defensive player with 20. He recovered 30 fumbles, which is also an NFL record. So there you go. Howley, Nobis, Greenwood, and Marshall are just four examples of why the NFL writers collectively suck. And we, the fans, need to put pressure on them to institute changes, right the wrongs, and put players in who truly deserve to be in. Maybe they can make a special provision next year to get these guys in that I mentioned. And that could pave the way for others, including Raiders such as Plunkett and Hayes, to be able to make it in. Lots of things should be considered. And lots of people who are currently voters should just have their credentials pulled, or at least threatened. I'm angry, and I want other people to let their voices be heard as well. I'm T3, and I have just teed off on the NFL writers as a collective unit.
Oh, yeah. And the NFL writers are the bane of my existence. They are horrible when it comes to electing people to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's amazing who they skip. Now, the problem with the four that you just mentioned is the Pro Football Hall of Fame just had a huge class of seniors inducted a year or two ago. I think it was 10 altogether. It was Drew Pearson's class, I believe. And they're probably not going to want to do that again for a while. So we're looking at one senior finalist a year if they keep things the way they are. And it's going to take forever for these guys to make it in. And it's just wrong. These are guys that have resumes that knock the socks off of current players. They should be in. And it's a shame that they aren't. The writers really should be ashamed of themselves. They are a very frustrating profession.
And, they could do this. They could come together as a collective unit and go to the Hall of Fame and say, look, we need to make some changes and get some people in that truly deserve it, particularly some of these guys who are getting ready basically to die. They're never going to see their moment in the sun, and their families won't either. And I'm so glad that we got Tom Flores in before that happened. But the writers are going to have this on their hands. And if they don't make a change soon, you're going to have a lot more players. Their moment's going to be gone. And it's a waste. And I think there is something that can be done. They have to do it. But the writers have to initiate this, and they have to get up in touch with the Hall of Fame and say, look, we need to make a change. We need to institute something to take care of these players who made such an impact on the game and basically who we have cheated for so many years.
I agree. Okay, give us a call at 904-701-8667. Leave a voicemail or text message at that number, or send in a message via social media, and we will share your thoughts. And this week, we actually have a couple of voicemails to share.
Okay.
So.
Hey, guys. This is John from Ohio calling in. I just want to know what you guys thought about Patrick Graham. I don't really know much about it. If you maybe give us some insight on him, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
All right, John, thanks for calling in. We have talked about Patrick Graham a little bit in the last two episodes, but do you have anything to share beyond that, T3?
Well, I think we mentioned earlier, I was really happy to see Patrick Graham bring in Antonio Pierce to work with the linebackers. I'm just really curious to see how he's going to bring together the entire defensive staff, and even more curious to see what guys they decide to bring in through free agency. I think once we see that, and once we see them working directly with the guys, we'll be able to comment more. I'm very hopeful. I think when I heard Patrick Graham talking in his press conferences about the fact that he just wants to get guys out there, and it doesn't matter what type of scheme they run. He just wants to put people in position to have them make their most impact, which is refreshing. Gus Bradley hardly blitzed at all last year. We knew that coming in. I think teams took advantage of that. But let's see if he's able to make those changes to the point where we can bring in some blitzes and do some things unexpectedly to kind of catch teams on their heels a little bit. So I'm hopeful. We'll see what Patrick Graham does. It's a little early yet. I don't really know him that well, except for what I've seen him do with the Giants. So let's just sit back and see how it all unfolds.
Okay. Let's see if I downloaded the right one.
Only Nation Podcast, Raider Steve, Richmond, VA. How are y'all doing? I'm catching up on my episodes. A couple things I'm curious about, and, I imagine it's going to be a long off season. Are we going to keep cable? What's got me thinking about that is one of the recent episodes, I think it was episode before last, Heidi had mentioned that cable had called some plays down the stretch, and that the offensive output was noticeably different than when the offensive coordinator had been calling the plays. So I'm not a big fan of maybe I do like cable for reasons I won't get into. But I'm not a big fan of our offensive coordinator, and obviously he's gone. I'm not a big fan of the new regime either, but it's going to be a long off season. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But I am curious what the difference with cable is. Little shout out to Homer, Mission. Hope you're coming back. I've been playing along with Did You Know, and I'm doing all right. Above 500, so I'll take that as a win. Looking forward to your next podcast. Thanks, fellas. Bye.
Speaking of Homer, I miss Homer too. Where is Homer?
He didn't show up for recording today. I don't know where he is.
He missed the team bus?
He missed the team bus. He was a healthy scratch.
We'll just have to check the locker room after the show, I guess, and see if he's still there.
Yeah, he's probably in there with the Commandos.
As for Tom Cable, as far as I know, he is without a team right now. We obviously have somebody in place for the offensive line, but it could be that Cable will have found a landing spot by the time this airs. But we don't wish Tom Cable well. I know we've said both positive and negative things about him, but I certainly do wish him well. And he was able to put together a good offensive line last year. I think this year was a bit of a step back, but I think he has had both good things and not so good things to the Raider organization.
Yeah, when he first came back, I was so pissed off about it. I was like, I can't believe they rehired this guy. There were a few seasons where he proved me wrong, where he actually did a good job with the offensive line. But last couple, been a little bit inconsistent. And I think after this past season, it was time for him to go. He did help in calling some of the offensive plays in some of the games, and that was apparent to see the difference. Greg Olson isn't really an offensive coordinator. Let's face it, he sucks at calling plays.
Now, I understand that the Alex Leatherwood pick was really Tom Cable's decision and the guy that he really wanted. So I think when we look at Alex Leatherwood's success or failure, that really gets pinned on Tom Cable one way or the other. So if he turns out to be a real big success, I think we need to circle back around and give Tom Cable credit. But if he turns out to be a total bust, then that gets hung squarely on Cable as well.
Yeah, and that remains to be seen. He's only played 1 year, so it's still going to take a couple of years for him to warm up and really settle in. Okay, and on Raider Roots this week, what is the topic?
All right, so this week we will pay a visit to the year 1985. The Raiders made the playoffs, but it was an ugly result and an even uglier ending after the game.
Yes, it was, and I actually already listened to this episode, and it was one of my favorite after endings scenes in all of Raider history.
Long live Matt Millen.
Guys, you don't want to miss it. All right, and can we find out what we do or don't know?
All right, it's time for another edition of Did You Know? In this segment, I will ask Heidi and our entire listening audience a Raiders-related question with 3 multiple-choice answers to choose from, so just give it your best guess. Here is this week's question, kind of a fun question here. So 2 weeks ago, we had a question involving legendary Raiders offensive lineman Steve Wisniewski. Well, we're going back to him now. When Steve was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in 1989, his draft rights were quickly acquired by the Raiders. Someone from the Raiders called Steve to let him know about the trade, and Steve actually hung up on him. And this person had to actually call back a second time to inform Steve about his new team and his new destination. So who is it that Steve hung up on? Is it A, Al Davis, B, Art Shell, or C, Mike Shanahan? Heidi, what do you think?
Well, nobody dare ever hang up on Al Davis. So I think it's Al Davis. A.
The correct answer is C, Mike Shanahan.
Well, I would hang up on him too.
I thought that you were actually going to guess him for that very reason, because we would all hang up on Mike Shanahan. But anyway, Mike was the head coach, at least at that time, soon to be replaced by Art Shell. But yes, Mike is the one who called up Steve to let him know that he was going to become a Raider, and Steve actually hung up on him. And Shanahan had to call him back, and as soon as Steve answered the phone, Mike said, no, don't hang up. Don't hang up. This is Mike Shanahan with the Raiders. So it was pretty funny. Anyway, that's this week's question, and that's the answer. Answer is C, Mike Shanahan. So for once, Mike Shanahan is the correct answer on Did You Know?
Mike Shanahan is never the correct answer.
Okay. Point taken. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for Heidi's Heroes.
By the way, on a wing and a prayer, who could it be?
Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, it is time for Heidi's Heroes. I am repurposing some information that I wrote up for a Ladies of Darkness episode a couple of years ago, because I did a lot of research on it, and I think it really tells the story of this guy that is the hero this week. My hero this week is Cliff Branch. Cliff Branch was a fourth-round pick of the Raiders in the 1972 draft. He played his entire 14-year NFL career for the Raiders in Oakland and Los Angeles. He also played one season of arena football for the Los Angeles Cobras after retiring from the NFL. His NFL career included winning 3 Super Bowls, being voted into 4 Pro Bowls, earning first-team All-Pro honors 3 times, leading the league in receiving yards in 1974, and being the league's receiving yards leader twice. He was the only Raiders wide receiver to play on all 3 winning Super Bowl teams. He finished his NFL career with 501 receptions for 8,685 yards and 67 touchdowns. In 20 playoff contests, he compiled 73 receptions for 1,289 yards, an average of 17.7 yards per catch, and 5 touchdowns. On October 2nd, 1983, during a game against the Washington Redskins, a 37-35 loss, Branch caught a pass from quarterback Jim Plunkett thrown from the Raiders' end zone at the 35-yard line and ran the remaining 64 yards in for a touchdown. All told, it was a 99-yard touchdown reception, the longest passing play possible in the NFL, and one of only 13 times it's happened in league history. It will always stand as the longest pass play in Raiders history. When he retired, he held the NFL career playoff records for receptions and receiving yards. This record stood until broken by Jerry Rice. The popular term of speed kills was often used when referencing Branch, since he was so fast, making him difficult to defend. In October of 2017, Cliff Branch was evacuated from his Santa Rosa home in the middle of the night due to a large fire raging towards him. He lost everything in that fire. His house had been destroyed, including with that was his enormous collection of Raider memorabilia. Among the only notable things he escaped with was the car he was driving and his 3 Super Bowl rings. In spite of losing everything in the fire, Branch headed to Las Vegas, where he volunteered to help raise funds to assist victims of a horrible mass shooting only days earlier on October 1st. Branch showed he was a hero by reaching out and helping others, even though he was going through one of the toughest events in his life. He put others before himself in a truly selfless act. Branch died in his sleep on August 3, 2019, at the age of 71. After years of being snubbed for induction to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, he was posthumously voted in for it earlier this month. In light of Cliff's accomplishments on and off the field, it's not hard to see why he's Heidi's hero this week. I just wish I would be naming him while he was still alive.
Hear, hear. Well said. You put a lot of thought and effort into that. And there's nothing more that I can say that we haven't already, except for the fact that you'll never, ever meet a nicer person than Cliff Branch. And everybody who's ever talked about Cliff's smile, that's the one thing that preceded him everywhere he went. He smiled and had a good attitude and a good, kind word to say, no matter who he was with or where he was.
Definitely. All right, guys, and you still have another week to enter to win a Chucky's Thugs flag. So if you want to win a flag, just message us, let us know that you want to be entered into the contest, and you got a good chance of winning.
Now, we will not be airing next week. There will be a Raiders Roots podcast next week. We'll go ahead and do 1986 during our off week. Then we'll be regathering and getting back together with everyone in just a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, it's the off season, so we're taking a few days off. And that about does it for this week on the Only Nation podcast. If you'd like to help support the show, you can send in a donation at paypal.me/onlynationpod. You can find me, Heidi Stabbert, on social media as @KevlarPromDress on Twitter and Instagram, or Heidi Stabbert on Facebook. You can also find me on YouTube on Captain Jack Rackham's channel every other Tuesday night. Join the DC wench Peggy Holmes and Angria Trask on the Captain and His Wenches show.
All right, Raider Nation, even though it's the off season, keep up with us and we'll keep you up to date on all the Raiders' comings and goings. Send us your name and address so we can send you some free Raiders swag and podcast stickers. Call us and tell us what you want to know, as several of you have. Throw us an interesting nugget that we could use on one of our upcoming episodes and become a part of what we're doing here. Remember, this is the Only Nation, and we want you to be a part of it. So call us 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. Call us now and join the Only Nation podcast family. There are two easy ways to find me on social media. You can send me a tweet at T3_sports703, as several of you do, or you can hit me up on Facebook at Tom, T-H-O-M, Jones. I also want to thank you for all your continued support of the Raider Roots podcast. This week, we will revisit the year 1985. As I mentioned, it turns out pretty ugly. And next week, in the absence of the Only Nation podcast, we will still be running a Raider Roots episode, which will cover the year 1986.
As always, we will look forward to hearing from you guys. Until next time, everyone, go Raiders.
We are not just a nation. We are the only nation. Raider.